Hello everyone, and welcome to episode 45 of Podcast vs. Enemies, a Destiny Massive Breakdown show. We're back in a fresh new year, and with the clock ticking down to Lightfall, we have plenty to break down and discuss over the coming weeks. This week, we're going to recap some content drops since we were last on air, and we are celebrating the podcast's first birthday with some special retrospectives from us and her lovely community. Impetus, who have we got to thank this week?
We've got quite a few people to thank, both in this section and a little bit later on in the episode court. I want to shout out some new patrons, as we're going to be taking that up as part of our show, thanking everyone that has joined our Patreon. So without further ado, I want to thank Matter Matters, Mossy, Stevie Danger, Ethereal Minds, and Brazen. Thank you so much for joining the D&B community and supporting us. That means a lot to us, and we really appreciate your support. We have no new podcast reviews, but we do have plenty of wonderful feedback that we'll be touching on a little bit later on. So as a reminder, you can send us all kinds of feedback directly to any of our socials or via the Destiny Massive Breakdowns Discord server. Positive, critical, and constructive feedback helps with the trajectory of our show and how we present and break down builds, activities, and much more in the PvE sandbox for all kinds of Destiny players. So please don't hesitate to reach out if you've got any questions or ideas for builds. We're all happy to talk Destiny. We also use Chartable to aggregate the podcast reviews, so this may take some time for our non-US based listeners' reviews to appear. So if you want to get a special thank you a little bit closer to when you send in the review, you can send it, the review that is, to any of our socials right away so that we get notified as quickly as possible. And finally, we also want to extend a special thank you and appreciation, especially on this episode, to everyone that supports PvE. You guys mean the world to us, and it is any action such as downloading and listening to the show, discussing it in the Discord server or on any other social media website, or supporting us via Patreon. Those actions are everything to us, and it has blown us away these past 365 days, which is incredible to think about. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm going to pass you over to Saint. We'll talk about the show outline here.
Hello, gentlemen. It's good to be back after a few week break over the holidays. Today, we've got kind of interesting episode. We're going to start it off with some talk about the exotic quests, Seraph Station, Revision 0. We're going to spend a little bit of time talking about some new traits that have come into the game this season, and then we're going to wrap things up with our first birthday of Podcast vs. Enemies retrospective. Before we get into our main topics, there are just a couple things we want to cover, just some stuff that's been going around the community, previous episodes, all that stuff. Court, you want to kick us off?
All right. Yes. Thank you, Saint. Yeah, two people want to shout out specifically. We've got a much larger shout out as well, much later on. But first person to shout out is Cursed Avenger, who put together a very great, comprehensive and concise damage stacking guide up on YouTube. Very kindly shouted out my coffee as well, which I was not expecting, very unprompted. We also have Sweat Spooks Games, who also put out a video recently related to some sort of build crafting kind of overshield overview. Again, sourced from my spreadsheet and shouted out the Massive Breakdowns community. We also have a massive shout out from Datto, who gave one of our Massive Breakdowns resident damage testers, Rock DC, a shout out in his most recent video related to target lock. We are going to talk about target lock and Cascade Point later on in the episode. On the topic of something that's been, I think, pretty contentious very recently, and it's actually one of something which will directly link into my announcement that I'll make very shortly as well. It's related to Chill Clip on Bump of the Night. That has been all over the social media the past week or so. And we did just want to take a little bit of a second to talk about it, what's really going on, because I think there's a little bit of a misunderstanding what's going on, especially with the way that shatter damage works. So the damage that comes from freezing and shattering an enemy rapidly via Wolfpack rounds is substantial, but it doesn't overtake stuff like field prep and explosive light hothead. That's still the sort of go-to damage strategy that you want to take. As a reminder, frozen targets do take 5% more damage from special and heavy weapons, but actually landing a rocket your rocket launcher impact damage when the boss is frozen is pretty dependent on RNG. There is also a limit how frequently a boss can take damage from being frozen and shattered. So having 3 or more players on a team running this is detrimental. I think the recommendation we would make, or I would personally make, is 1 or 2 people with chill clip bump in the night is fine. But any more than that does start to eat into your potential damage. And I think still looking at the damage charts, we still see that something like Hothead or what's the Vault of Glass, His and Vengeance.
Yep.
Those will still have much better total damage and much better DPS overall compared to Bump in the Night. As a little kind of side note here, Whisper Fissures, it was understood many months ago to be pretty good, but I don't think anyone did any substantial testing with Fissures. And yeah, it's like a very small increase to the shatter damage. It turns out initially we thought it was 50%, but it's something like between 1 to 10% for the shatter damage, and it's pretty. It's not worth it having Whisper Fissures attached. All right, I'm going to pass you over to Impetus, who's going to talk about a certain specific subject that was discussed last episode.
Yeah. All right. This section that we're starting here on the podcast is called Impetus Eats Crow. If you've been a long-time listener, you know that we've actually already had this section several times. I just haven't called it officially by this name. So, yes, last episode we were doing a review of the Seraph weapons and the Ikelos weapons, and for the Ikelos SMG, one of my favorite weapons of all time, I recommended the combo of Feeding Frenzy and Volt Shot, not knowing that Feeding Frenzy and Volt Shot do not mix well at all. They are more like toothpaste and orange juice. From a technical point of view, when you jolt an enemy with Volt Shot after reloading your weapon, that enemy that is initially jolted needs to die before any other enemies die from jolt to build stacks of Feeding Frenzy. If an enemy that is standing next to the original enemy that's jolted dies from that blast from Volt Shot, that kill is not counted for Feeding Frenzy. So if you want to build up stacks of Feeding Frenzy, get up to those 3rd, 4th, and 5th stacks, which is typically what we want when we're putting Feeding Frenzy on a weapon, you don't want to use Volt Shot, as that's going to be very, very difficult to pull off consistently. So for Ikelos SMG, what I will recommend instead, Perpetual Motion or Threat Detector in Column 3 with Volt Shot. Those are going to be much better, as those just give you stat bumps based on certain actions that are not in any way dependent on Volt Shot and how it procs. So that is my bad. I should have consulted with my co-hosts before I recommended Feeding Frenzy and Volt Shot, but you know what? We're taking this knowledge into the new year. It's a new me. I will do a better job of that in the future. Okay, let's move on to Destiny 2. What we did last week or last week's. Saint, what did you do?
I crafted a couple things. I got to craft my Ikelos SMG, speaking of which was a big-time W. Also crafted my first Deep Zone weapon. I went for a Posterity because I had a couple of those drop in the wild, so I immediately started to go for that. And maybe it's like the 180 that pushes me over the edge to use 180s. I don't know. To be determined. That thing's only like level 5 right now. I gotta get to like 9 or 10 before I can put the perks I want on it. So we'll see. Could be a redemptive moment here. Also, we just run some raids, some dungeons over the break. Kind of had some nice time off. Probably took about a week off from the game as well, just hanging out with family. And I also just started taking some classes on Unity online. Unity is a game engine which you can access for free if you're a solo developer not looking to publish and make money. There's licensing for actually publishing games on it and things like that, but it's been a really nice way for me to kind of engage myself in learning game development from a low level. It's just like not very prohibitive. It's very easy to access something like this, right? And I'm hoping to put out some really, really crappy games in the near future. and we'll see. I'll be posting all about that on social media and stuff if I'm ever actually able to produce something functioning. But hopefully in the next few weeks here. It's
Massive Breakdowns the game.
I really wanted to, kind of an idea that somebody told me was that like you can make a game that's like kind of dumb and it can still be really fun, right? Their example was like Goat Simulator, right? And I was like, yeah, Goat Simulator is like the stupidest thing ever, but it's also pretty easy to have fun playing it for an hour. So then I've had some other animal-related ideas, and I really wanted to make a game where you're a pigeon and you want to bestow good luck upon people, so your entire objective is to try to poop on them from the air, and there's like some targeting going on there and some stuff like that, but we'll see. I need to hone in my Unity skills a little bit more before we can get to something like Good Luck Chuck, but anyways.
Will airborne effectiveness be a stat
that
pigeons need
to be
worry
determined?
About?
All right,
Okay.
and I'm thinking maybe like your wings could have an impact on the accuracy of your droppings. We'll see.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we'll see. Court, what have you been up to, man?
Not as interesting, to be honest. Honestly, I've been having a lot of fun laughter with the Destiny Massive Breakdowns patrons, whether it's been on the Serve Station, which we'll talk about shortly, Deepstone Crypt runs, Iron Banner heists. The last week was sort of the first week I got back into Destiny after taking a couple of weeks off for the holidays, and I've been playing a lot of Iron Banner. Very close to that shader. I think that's the buzz right now for Destiny. Is the shader after resetting twice, or at the end of the first reset, gives you a sort of chainmail effect on fabric, and it looks really cool. It looks really sweet. So I am grinding that out. I think I'm only around 5,000 XP or Iron Banner points away from it. So very close. Finally got the touch of malice. Still one of the most interesting concepts and designs for an exotic. I want to try and make it work in some of my PvE builds, especially with having arc blind synergy, weirdly. And I'll talk about this very shortly, but I've been ramping up some infographic production. Got several in the pipeline, on top of one that's coming out very soon. Impetus, what have you been up to?
Yeah, a lot of running activities, a lot of crafting. So I've got every seasonal weapon except for the Tripwire Canary bow and the Ikelos shotgun crafted. I've also played a bunch of Iron Banner. I'm a little bit further behind than Cord. I got about 7,000 XP until I get the shader. I might wait until the second week of Iron Banner just so I don't lose my mind in six stacking IP. But I've been playing with the D&B community, so that does make it a lot nicer. And I also got the Mida Multi-Tool Catalyst, which as a PvE player, I kind of had written that one off because that used to be in the old version of comp. So I just thought, well, it's probably no chance I'll ever get that unlocked. And I'm a completionist, so I do want to get that. But it drops randomly because that's now the new way it works. It drops randomly at the end of a Crucible win, I believe is the condition now. So got that. It'll probably take me another 2 years to complete it, but hey, at least I have it unlocked. And I've also got Touch of Malice and Hierarchy of Needs unlocked, so that was really awesome. Saint got to be there for a super lucky run to see the Touch of Malice drop for myself and a few other of his raid crew, but yeah, that's been great. The second thing I've been working on is continuing the verb builds. So I've been trying to make builds centered around each of the verbs for our new 3.0s. So went over to Arc, specifically Arc Warlock, and I made a Jolt build for them with Crown of Tempest, and then using any Volt Shot weapon. And then I also did the Ionic Trace build with Cold Heart and Fallen Sunstar that's gained some traction in the community already. I know Dado made a video on that. It's a lot of fun. It's a really cool support build, and it's nice that we have it on an element other than Solar for the Warlocks. So that's been a lot of fun. I will continue to be making a few other things. I got the Overshield one on Titan that I want to tackle now that Repulsor Brace is showing up in the third column for a few Void weapons. So lots to look forward to on that end, but that's enough about me. Court, what's going on with these infographics of yours?
Yeah, so I've been hyping this up for a while. I know most of last year, 2022, I've been talking about doing them, and I did a few, but then just ran into the wall, so to speak, creatively. Yeah. Can't even speak because I've been that up against the wall. But I am finally actually working on some infographics. I've got one. Speaking of rocket launchers, speaking of bump in the night, I've got one releasing hopefully by the time this episode goes up, or very shortly thereafter. I know I've got a few kind of IRL traveling and work to do, so I might not get in time. But it's about 95% complete. And yeah, it's to do with a relatively hot topic. Very recently, this has been getting a lot of buzz, and that's regarding rocket launchers. Because they may be in a very good position in Lightfall, as we know that LFRs are getting toned down just a little bit. So the rocket launcher types infographic will be up on my Twitter. That's at Court Projects, and in the Destiny Massive Breakdowns Discord. Again, hopefully by the time this episode goes out, but maybe sometime this week of release. And it's just to do with a refresher with rocket launcher frames, or the archetypes as we call them, and how they do well in a particular role. We have discussed this in a previous episode many months ago, but the abridged version here is to do with, so you've got precisions like Ascendancy, which is the ritual weapon, and Royal Entry, which is a Vanguard drop weapon for a couple of seasons ago now. They do 21% less damage than adaptives and aggressives, and they've got weak blast radius and reload base stats, but they have access to built-in tracking. The same with Hacky Precisions. Palmaria B is the only one currently. They also have that 21% less damage, but they also have access to tracking and Hacky Breach armaments. High impacts like Roar of the Bear, which is the current Iron Banner drop, or one of the drops, and Sleepless, which you can get from Dreaming City. They do 10% more damage than Precisions, but 10% less than Adaptives and Aggressives. They do have strong blast radius and handling, but they've got weak velocity-based stats. Adaptives, like Blowout, which is very much dropping in Crucible. I noticed that when I was playing Iron Banner, and Red Herring, which is the Throne World craftable. They do 21% more damage than Precisions. However, they don't really excel at any specific base stat, and have pretty average stats across the board. So you have to kind of really build into velocity or blast radius or handling if you want to do that, but they don't excel anything specifically. And lastly, you've got aggressives like Bump in the Night, which is the Season 17 Haunted weapon and is craftable. Will be disappearing by the end of this season for Lightfall. We're not sure if that will be craftable through a legacy system. We don't know just yet anyway. But if you want to get that, now is your time to get it. Those get 21% more damage than Precisions. They've got a strong reload and velocity base stat, but they have pretty weak blast radius and handling base stats. On top of that, I will also be highlighting some recommended perks, whether that's to do with utility or damage, along with some brief highlights on how rocket launchers, how their damage ratio kind of affects other perks, and the sort of best ammo efficient rocket launchers as well. Other infographics in the pipeline, including but not limited to damage stacking, super generation, elemental sandboxes, and just sort of synergies, stuff like that, much more. Had someone actually mention this in my Twitter mentions, asking about infographics for the podcast. So, for example, when we break down a weapon or a set of weapons or builds, and just show our recommendations and making a graphic for something like that. I'm not committing to anything to do with that just yet, but I would like to visit that sometime in the future. So again, that'll be something that maybe post Lightfall. So if we do, like, let's take the Deepstone crit weapons. I'm not saying this is happening. But
wow, next week? Man, jeez.
I wish.
Okay.
We take Deepstone crit weapons and we recommend XYZ and all these weapons, and I put this on a big graphic to say this is podcast versus enemies approved, and our recommendations. Something like that, something akin to that, but not anytime soon, sometime in the future.
But it's a good idea, though.
All right. Yeah. Yes, yeah. I've been wanting to do something like that for the show, but it's just a lot of time commitment. And right now I'm focusing on sort of personal projects that I've been wanting to get out the way first, like damage stacking and such. But hopefully post Lightfall. All right. Now, we missed a big release It came out, we knew it was coming, but there was substantial amount of content, shall we say, in terms of a certain Seraph station and a certain new exotic. Saint, what can you tell us about the mission?
We've got a new exotic mission, and we're going to space again. This is Operation Seraph Shield, and it is our kind of most recent mission in a line of Whisper, 0 hour presage, kind of think along the same vein. And this one is really drawing on a lot of the kind of the themes, I would say, and the mechanics, and also the strengths of a Deep Stone Crypt, and trying to create a new experience that's focused on a station that is not in the Europa atmosphere, but it is in Earth's atmosphere. This is kind of a Warmind station, and there's some, there's obviously like story leading up to supporting this incident, but the moral of the story is there is a space station kind of akin to Deep Stone Crypt. We need to go up into the space station and go through this mission to make sure that we are containing this threat, and we are reuniting Rasputin with hidden pieces of himself, and we're also kind of investigating a frame from a weird Golden Age kind of crossover project, which ends up being Revision Zero. My favorite thing about this is that you can just go in on your standard difficulty and focus entirely on just the environment and the mechanics and trying to figure it out, or you can go in on Legend and actually have a bit of a contest, and also a literal contest. Seeing them use that modifier in something like a mission like this is super interesting. I don't think that we have had that before. I believe that the Legend modes have always just been like higher light level, right? And you have to just be higher level to meet those requirements, kind of like your master dungeons and things like that. But seeing them use these contest modifiers in a seasonal activity, like a 5-point modifier, or in this activity, I believe is another like 5 or 10-point contest modifier, is really nice. And it gives this feeling of mastery, not in the way that like, oh, I grinded my artifact level and now I've mastered this activity because I just have more artifact power. But it's more like I've mastered this activity because I've done it several times and I've really honed in my strategies and efficiencies, right? And I always prefer that over the former, as far as just like my level number went up, so now I can beat this activity, which is not as satisfying, IMO. This has also evolved a little bit as we gain access to these Seraph security upgrades, right? There's a security upgrade for opening up some doors and little puzzles that come with it, and those all allow access to the drones that you're able to collect with this weapon, and there's a nice little kind of secret in there, and also some secret chests thrown throughout the mission, kind of reminiscent of some Beyond Light quests. Imtis, Court, any thoughts on our Operation Seraph Shield here?
Go for it, Court.
Two things I wanted to talk about was what you mentioned there about his difficulty and how it scales on Legend mode. And Legend mode is where you'll have to upgrade a specific exotic, which we'll talk about shortly. But going in as a solo is much easier than going in as a trio. I'll tell you that. And it's using very similar kind of Legend mode as the Witch Queen campaign. And if this is a kind of Bungie telling us, yes, we're going to be adding this to more things, then I am very excited for this kind of type of contest modifier, if you want to call it that, for not just these exotic quests or the campaign, because we know the Lightfall campaign is also going to get this treatment, but for all types of content. The actual place that we go visit, Seraph Station, and the sort of mechanics that you start to learn is a great prelude to Deep Stone Crypt raid, where you've got suppressor, you've got scanner, and you've got operator buffs. And it's such a great tutorial. And again, if this is another, I'm not expecting raids to have a kind of exotic quest attached to them for new lights to get their kind of a sort of tutorial to how to play the raid. But if this is another example of something that we'll hopefully see in the future, where you've got a raid that releases then a couple couple of months or maybe a year or so after, you get some sort of tutorial mission that taps into the mechanics that, we've already learned. We know Deepstone Crypt by the the back of our hand, but for new lights, recommending to come into this specific exotic quest is like, yeah, go and do that, and you'll get pretty much 95% of the gist of the mechanics around Deepstone Crypt. So those 2 points were big highlights for me for this mission.
Yeah, it's kind of like what is the Throne World mission? Preservation, right? It is very akin to this in the way that it teaches, kind of gets you started on, maybe not the entire mechanics. Val is a little more dense, right? But really gives you a great platform to start from. If you're trying to learn a raid, go play Preservation, right? Or now go play Seraph Shield, and you'll have a great base to start from.
Before you jump in, Impetus,
go ahead.
I was just going to make a quick point about, so I think we know that this mission is disappearing at the end of this season, if I'm not mistaken, which is a real shame.
Yeah.
That's a massive shame, especially considering we've only had, not even 12 weeks of this. We've had 10 weeks, something like that, for this exotic mission. And it's a real shame that something like this is going to be disappearing. I don't mean it in terms of like, it's a piece of content that's going away. I just mean for the new lights, attaching that to my previous point about, if you want to learn Deepstone Crypt, this is the place to do it. But, people are going to have, new lights will buy Lightfall and they won't have access to something like this, which is a real big shame. Sorry, Impetus, off you go.
No, I was going to say, I have, there's one big positive for this mission and then one big negative, and you've both spelled out what they are, which is, the big positive is that we're teaching people how to do a raid that's not going away, right? Deepstone Crypt is here for the rest of Destiny 2, and we want to get more people into these endgame activities, right? That's why we have this show, but also this is another example. Bungie, Preservation as well does this, of trying to introduce players who maybe feel a little bit intimidated by killing enemies and doing mechanics at the same time. And so we get these curated spaces where you get to learn those mechanics kind of at your own pace, right? They're not that overwhelming on the regular difficulty. And you get to know how to do these things by yourself without a fire team, but you can also be in a 3-person fire team if you really want to. And then you get to put yourself to the test by doing this legend difficulty and seeing how you perform with doing these mechanics, having a challenge, again, either by yourself or with 2 or 3 people. And seriously, if you can do the legend difficulty Seraph Shield mission by yourself, doing all those mechanics, you are ready for Deepstone Crypt. Like you are going to breeze through Deepstone Crypt with a group of people that know what they're doing. And I think that's a fantastic strategy that Bungie's developed. They started with Preservation when Witchqueen first came out. And it kills me that we had to wait until the very last season, the shortest season that we've had, for this to happen. And it wasn't even out for all of the weeks of this season. And I really, really, really hope that Bungie can find a way to save this mission, because it kills me that we have such a perfect primer for Deepstone Crypt right here. Like, if I ever run into somebody in my clan who's a new Destiny player and they were ever wondering about Deepstone Crypt, how to get ready, I could just point them at this mission, say, do this, and you're good to go. Like, we'll carry you the rest of the way there, but you'll know at least how the mechanics work. So, yeah, if it is truly gone entirely by the time Lightfall drops, I'm going to be bummed, and I really do feel like I understand why they had to wait until this season, right? Narratively, it just makes sense, but you can't be dropping this on us in the last season of the year, man. I mean, it's just, it kills me. And of
Absolute
course, the
rug pull.
Skybox, it's brutal. It's brutal. It's such a wonderful mission. They really, I mean, they've never failed on the exotic missions. It's been incredible. And yeah, Joe, I mean, we're getting, I mean, I know some of the developers did talk about the exotic missions and secrets in a Twitter thread a few weeks ago about, what to expect and Bungie's commitment to making secrets. And we love that. We really do. Obviously, these things take a lot of development time and resources to make. But I think with Seraph Station in particular, the fact that it's also an educational tool for a raid that's in the game as well, that just takes it to the next level. It's not reusing content. I want to make that very clear. We are putting these mechanics in easier to access activities so that more people get to play raids and dungeons. Because when more people play raids and dungeons, we get more raids and dungeons, right? When the numbers go up in activity populations, that's when Bungie pays attention. So this is a great change. I want to see more raid mechanics showing up in seasonal activities, these exotic missions, because that's what makes people more familiar with this stuff, and that's what encourages them, builds that confidence, so they actually feel like they can go tackle these activities. And so I don't agree at all with people saying, well, this is just, another example of Bungie devs being lazy and reissuing or copy pasting content. That's not what it is. You got to look at the bigger picture here. We're getting more in-game content by having more people familiar with how Deepstone Crypt works, right? That gets more people into Deepstone Crypt. That tells Bungie that they should keep making raids and dungeons, because we have a large population of players that want to do raids and dungeons. So that's, I'm so conflicted though. It's a huge positive, but it's also just a huge negative on the mission itself and the timing and the context of it. But again, it's not much. I'm not going to dwell on that. We've got a lot of stuff to talk about. One thing that's absolutely a positive, though, is what you get when you do the mission, which is the Revision 0 Exotic Pulse Rifle. This is coming to us from our very own Massive Breakdowns community member, the founding member, you might say, Mercules himself. He's now working on the weapons team. He has developed this Exotic Pulse Rifle, and it's a banger. It's got a lot to it. It's very complicated, very fun for PvE and PvP. We're going to talk about it right now. So the way that this thing works, of course, you do need to run the Seraph Station or the Seraph Shield mission over and over again to unlock upgrades for the weapon, and that will change both its physical appearance, but then also the way that it functions. You'll get some stat bumps as you increase the exotic perk. You will also unlock extra barrels and magazines and column 3 perks, but then also different catalysts. This is one of the I think this is the first exotic that has more than one catalyst. They are all extra perks. You can think of them like column 4 perks basically, but yep, you'll unlock extra catalysts, and then there's also some barrels as well, because this is an exotic weapon, so you get to upgrade those as well. The exotic perk is called Hunter's Trace. So the weapon does fire shield-piercing ammunition. That is code for anti-barrier. This is another anti-barrier kinetic weapon. Once again, rivaling Wishender, and then also trying to compete against Arbalest. We'll see if it really does, though, when we get through all the way through this. Precision hits will grant targeting data. You will see a little bar that shows up on the left side of your screen. Filling up that bar is done by landing precision hits. Just landing precision hits, not precision kills, precision hits. That's a very important distinction to make here. When you have reached one of 4 sections, or if you've reached that bar all the way filled up, you can swap to an alternate scope, an alternate mode, which will load up to 4 high damage rounds. And that's basically when this pulse rifle turns into a sniper rifle. You'll get a 50 zoom scope that's hanging on the side of the weapon. It will suddenly swap over to the main scope. You can aim down sights, but you will deal a massive amount of damage. Again, the precision targeting data bar is broken up into fourths. So once you reach a fourth, that translates to 1 bullet. You can have up to 4 of those bullets if you fill the bar up all the way. And you do that by landing precision hits. So on top of that, we also have 2 firing modes. This is a Hake weapon, and there are 2 distinct modes here, the light burst fire and the heavy burst fire. The light burst shoots 4 bullets, and the heavy burst shoots 2 bullets. Now there's also a stat swap that occurs when you switch between these 2 weapons. The 4 burst, that's the light burst, has a higher stability, and then the heavy burst has higher range. Now again, we're not entirely sure what the exact stats are, because the API is down for this weapon in particular. But again, you can also level up these specific stats as you get through the Hunter Traces 1 through 4. So needless to say, though, at the most upgraded versions, you're sitting at high 80s, low 90s for either stability or range, depending on the burst mode that you have. If you're in the light burst, you'll be sitting at a really high stability stat. Again, around 90 is really there, and then if you're in the heavy burst, that's the 2 bullet, that's about a 90 range. So this is a stat monster for sure. It feels great to shoot. When we come to which burst mode do you use for PvE versus PvP, because the exotic perk functions on precision hits, the 4 burst is going to be a little bit better for PvE, as we typically get to fight enemies that have a little bit bigger crit boxes than PvP guardians. So we have a really easy way of building up precision shots by hitting, say, something like an ogre or a tank when its crit spot is exposed, or a heavy shank, something like that. So we recommend using the 4 burst for PvE to get that targeting data filled up as quickly as possible. In PvP, however, you probably want to go with the 2 burst, as those bullets do actually deal more damage. You don't see the impact stat change when you swap between the modes, but the bursts do deal different types of damage. The 2 burst, of course, is harder hitting, so that's probably the one that you want to use in PvP, as it makes the weapon a little bit more lethal, and of course you do get higher range, so you can engage at longer distances. Now, on the barrels and mags, you do get to swap between a number. One of these, you'll need to level the weapon up with kills and activity completions to unlock all the different barrels and mags. Pretty standard stuff here. You can go with the arrowhead break, flared magwell. Again, the reload speed and handling are kind of on the lower end here. It's really the stability and the range that are the really juiced stats here. So I'm looking at handling especially. I want to make sure that I can handle this really well when I swap over to that sniper mode. So arrowhead break, flared magwell is going to be the really great one there. And then for the round perks, for the magazine, I'm looking at the round perks or appended mag, depending on what I want to do. If I want to get more bullets, you could go for a magazine perk, depending on a certain build that I'll talk about in just a second here. But round perks are also going to be great if you want to max out the range and stability. That's probably more if you're leaning for PvP. But again, if you really want to juice out the range and stability for PvE, you definitely can. Dealing with barrier champions at a distance is always recommended. So moving on to column 3, we've got several different options here. Moving target, Eye of the Storm, Perpetual Motion, Elemental Capacitor, Slick Draw, and Vorpal Weapon. Most of those are going to be PvP perks. Again, Elemental Capacitor could be interesting, as it does technically show up in column 3. However, none of our catalysts, which are our column 4 perks in this case, deal any damage. They're mostly reload or utility perks. So in this case, I'm not going to recommend Elemental Capacitor. Vorpal Weapon probably makes the most sense. Again, it's an anti-barrier weapon. Vorpal Weapon will apply to those barrier champions. It just does make sense. On the catalyst side, we've got Feeding Frenzy, Under Pressure, Outlaw, 4th Times the Charm. Looking at 4th Times the Charm here in combination with Vorpal Weapon and Appended Mag or one of the rounds perks. We do have Armor Piercing on here, so that could be really nice for having a primary weapon anti-barrier build, right? Vorpal Weapon, 4th Times, one of the round perks. That's going to be quite strong. In the 4-burst mode, having that high stability should be really easy, at least to hit crits on, say, a Barrier Servitor or a Barrier Knight, right? Make the weapon nice and stable. Building up that precision hits for the targeting data. You could swap to the sniper shot, also use that in anti-barrier mode if you want to take advantage of Vorpal Weapon. There's a build there for sure. Now, does this compete with Wish Ender and Arbalist? I'm going to wait until we fully level up the exotic pulse rifle until I get Hunter's Trace × 4 or level 4 before I make a commitment. But again, Arbalist also just has the shield popping mechanic, which can be very helpful. Wish Ender, though, I will say I think personally Revision 0 probably beats out Wish Ender. Excuse me, I'm getting those words mixed up. Revision 0 does beat out Wish Ender. I think this is a very strong weapon. Pulse rifles tend to get champion mods a lot. So, I always think about pulse rifles as a very popular weapon. Bungie seems to think of them as a very popular weapon choice for the endgame. Now, I'm not going to be able to take advantage of Overload or Unstop because this already has anti-barrier, but it does seem like Bungie cares about having pulse rifles in the PvE meta, artifact over artifact, season over season. So I think this does make a lot of sense, and I think having Vorpal Weapon 4th Times the Charm does make this a quite decent PvE exotic. Court, Saint, what do you guys think about this? How does this stand in our PvE meta as a primary weapon, especially in the kinetic slot?
Yeah, I completely agree with what you said there. I think Arbalist is always going to be the king for shields and barrier champions. And yeah, I don't have much deviation in terms of the build. Vorpal Weapon, 4th Times the Charm is definitely the one I'll be going for. In terms of general PvE play, I've been trying to get it to work, but I just keep kind of defaulting back to Outbreak Perfected as the current kind of, if I'm taking it into a champion piece of content, or a content that's got barrier champions, I think I would still maybe go for Outbreak Perfected, or flip it to one of the elemental pulses that we've got. Either that's Graviton, which has Vorpal as well, or Collective Obligation. I think it's more, with it being created by Merc, it does have that PvP focus, and I definitely get that sense. But yeah, I'm going to reserve kind of full judgment until we get the final upgrade for Hunter's Trace in a few weeks' time. Saint?
Yeah, I like the idea of I can build up my shots via smaller enemies, and then I'm landing some shots on an anti-barrier, whatever type of a servitor or anything like that, and I can just immediately switch to like an arbalest level of damage for no special ammo cost. I don't even have to worry about going double special and juggling my ammo economy or making sure I'm using like lead from gold or something like that to make up for the fact that I'm running double special. I can just run Revision 0 and like a Forbearance or something like that, a nice wave frame GL fusion, whatever I've got in my energy slot, and I even think about the ammo economy. But I wish that there was some way, like Corey, you mentioned Outbreak, which is such a good weapon. I mean, not only can it deal single target damage pretty well, but it can clear out a room very well. And I think that is like Revision 0 can do single target damage like great, and it has this like burst potential, but using it to clear out like dregs is not nearly as good enough of an experience in a high level piece of content as it is to use Outbreak Perfected. And that's just because Revision 0 doesn't have like a Dragonfly or Frenzy or Rampage or one of these type of style of perks to really level up its ad clearing. And I mentioned both the Void pulses, spoken like a true Your Funny Business user over here, and those are also like Graviton Lance has such a strong offering at this point with Your Falcons, which has almost the build requirement up to it, or activation requirement, is so low for how much damage you could deal, right, with like a Graviton, and Graviton can clear ads. Very satisfying to use, though, I will say. And I enjoy, like, we haven't leveled up an exotic to craft for a long time, or at least like, Osteostriga, right, which is one that came to mind when we were first doing this review, was really cool. And I do like the idea of investing in my exotic over time. Like I like just using my crafted weapons throughout activities, which I know like I'm supposed to just like go to Shirochi or like Morgeth and just grind out, or not Morgeth, Golgoroth, and just like grind out my levels for weapons. But I kind of enjoy that process of like, oh, I can feel my weapon getting more and more enjoyable to use as I put better and better traits on it as it gets leveled up. And it's the same thing for this exotic. Definitely going to be using this thing in the Crucible. And I'm sure that, Mark's already got 1,000 kills on his Crucible version of this thing, his baby.
I did take a peek when we were playing Iron Banner, and he was playing with a group on Iron Banner. I think he had it at like level 57.
Man,
brother,
but it's like his baby.
I do the same thing.
Yeah. And that part of it is super cool to see. Love to see his like idea come to life. And just hear him talk about that is really cool.
I will say we know that kinetic weapons or kinetic primary weapons are due for some sort of uplift. We know from our interview episode a few months ago that kinetics are due for some sort of uplift. So I'm not sure if this would apply to exotics. Outbreak Perfected is already quite a tearaway, even without pulse champion mods. It's a very good pulse rifle as it is, but if we do get some sort of uplift to kinetics, I want to try this again when that happens, because someone did actually message me on Twitter asking, what's the best damage stacking builds for a kinetic weapon, specifically for Revision 0. And there isn't really anything, other than your standard Well of Radiance and debuff. You don't have access to Font of Might. You don't have access to kind of those kind of elemental type of damage stackings. I suppose the other choice you could make is Whisper of Rending, which is a 42.5% increase to a frozen combatant, if you've got that on for kinetic. So you could take that in for Revision 0 if you're using a stasis build. But in terms of, damage potential, it is At the moment, there is some potential, but if we ever get that uplift anytime soon, I think the sniper shot will be almost kind of Arbalist level, even further than Arbalist. If you can start stacking it with all these damage buffs and debuffs.
You know, everybody's all talking about all the new 3.0s and Stasis and Strand, but I'm over here trying to capitalize on Monochromatic Maestro. Where's my kinetic subclass, you know? I don't know what that would look like, but I just started thinking of, like, imagine being able to build into, like, a kinetic Font of Might, right? Or anything like that, specifically that's like, yeah, maybe it's a little bit harder to generate, but then you can have a Font of Might style buff or something like that, you know, on Outbreak or on Witherhoard or whatever it may be. And I don't know if that's the route they want to go down, because it's like kind of pushing Connect towards other damage types, or if they want to make it stand out in other ways. I'm not really sure, you know, what that could be. But
I'm bummed that we didn't get an Osmosis Catalyst. I mean, can you imagine how strong this thing would have been? It struck me as kind of odd that we got both Outlaw 4 times and Feeding Frenzy as 3 of our 4 catalysts. Those are all reload based. Like, we're some of the more utility based options here. And Osmosis, instead of, you know, an Outlaw or Feeding Frenzy option, would have really ramped us up even more than having Vorpal Weapon in column 3. I mean, that would have been incredibly powerful.
yeah,
I mean, even Vorpal Weapon too, you know, it's nice, but I think based on the fantasy of the exotic pulse rifle and landing precision hits, I would have preferred something like Focused Fury, even if that's harder to proc, just because that's what the whole gun's about is, you know, land your shots, man. Win your ones, go for the head, click, and profit, you know. There's definitely room here for this to be a PvE monster, and it's definitely viable, but yeah, it feels like there's just that one very specific anti-barrier build, and then everything else really services this weapon for PvP, which isn't a bad thing, of course. You know, some things are just going to be naturally better for one of the sandbox sides than the other, and that's totally fine. But yeah, I mean, this could have been absolutely crazy in a real competitor or something like Outbreak. But yeah, I mean, that's really just the state the kinetic weapons are in. Even the exotics it's a tough line to walk to really stand out at this point.
yeah. Focus Fury is such an interesting one because it's like it's the same in both modes, but obviously it's way easier to proc in PvE. Like nobody's going to be who's getting Focus Fury up on a pulse rifle with 4 burst in PvP.
Probably Merc, honestly. Let's be honest.
Well, sure, but most people. Okay, all right. Court, what were you going to say?
I was going to say it does enter the anti-barrier exotics, a pretty busy category there. We've got Arbalist, as we've been talking about. We've got Wishender as well. But our Ariana's Vow, Lament, and the Titan's Second Chance. Quite a lot of things that can deal with barrier champions. On top of this season, a season having piercing, bowstring, and the aforementioned pulse rifle. You know, in terms, the point I made earlier was just like, well, I'd rather just take Outbreak Perfected than it does kind of like. But yeah, again, I would like to keep my final kind of opinion about Revision Zero until it's all crafted, can get all the things and the trinkets, and go from there.
Okay, well, that's the new mission, Revision Zero. Cool weapon. Cool mission, lots of secrets to uncover. I don't know. I think that about sums it up. You know,
if you haven't already played it, definitely go in blind because it's very fun.
Yeah. It's a great place to explore.
One of those, yeah, absolutely.
All right, we're gonna move on to another section, something we haven't done in a little bit. We're going to be breaking down some new traits. Specifically, we are talking about Cascade Point and Target Lock, which there has been a lot of discussion about, a lot of content about, a lot of theorizing this season so far. We are going to be taking a massive amount of detail on the kind of the more scientific side of these perks and the specific numbers from a Reddit post that comes from the same person that did the damage testing for the Chill Clip rockets that we were mentioning at the beginning of the episode. That's Rock DC. So big thank you to Rock. We'll make sure to have his post for full detail linked in the episode whenever this goes up. So big thanks to him because he took the time to do all of these super, super, not only detailed, but honestly very strange calculations for like RPM and stuff like that. Because as we'll get into in just a second, these are like very complicated perks. Whenever we compare them to something like Frenzy, that's like, oh, you're in combat for this period of time and you get these stat bonuses. Yeah, these are like way more complex than that. And also, kind of on that same theme, this just goes to show that like the weapons team continues to grow, not only in their like inventiveness, but also in the complexity of the things that they're able to design in the game, which is definitely not lost on us, that they're able to design things that are more and more complicated, while also not just like completely breaking the game or making something that is very powerful, but not necessarily very powerful all the time. And it takes more setup than something like a Rampage would or a Frenzy would, but also potentially offers much more. So starting off with Cascade Point. Cascade Point is entirely focused on RPM, and it is a scalar triggered by weapon kills or precision hits with another weapon and then swapping to it, a la, Harmony. If you're very familiar with that perk, you need to get a kills or rapid hits with one weapon and then switch to the other weapon. You will see some text pop up in your like buffs and debuffs feed that Cascade Point is ready. You've got about 5.5 seconds to swap to your Cascade Point weapon, and then once you swap, you'll have the RPM increase effective for 2.5 seconds, which doesn't sound like a lot, but there are some cases in which this can lead to substantial burst DPS increases on the right weapons. So I know that a whole 2.5 seconds, it doesn't seem like a lot, but it can be a lot. So we can talk about the trigger here. Obviously, getting a kill is pretty easy to understand, but there's also the precision hits. Precision hits have a counter to them, and it counts up. And this is something that you will also see when it comes to target lock. And the way that this is counted is kind of, or how much it counts is dependent on the weapon, and the kind of a rule of thumb here is like, a harder to hit or a more expensive weapon, special or heavy, is going to grant more percentage towards your activation than a more rapidly firing, easy to crit weapon, like linear fusions versus a submachine gun or something like that. So we need to be making these hits within about 4 seconds of each other, and you need to keep in mind that we're building up to 100% as like an activation, right? So your shotguns, bows, sniper, and LFR are all giving you 50% per hit, so that would just take 2 hits. When we get into some other easier weapons, next notch down, you get 17.5% per hit for hand cannon, scouts, and sidearms, and then only 8% per hit for trace, sub, auto, a machine gun, and a pulse rifle. So again, as an example, your sniper is going to take only 2 precision hits within 4 seconds, but a scout would take 6 precision hits within 4 seconds of each other, and then, so on and so forth as you go down to the lower stacking numbers there. There are some bugs with this where hitting like a weakened target can trigger Cascade Point. Shooting at a barricade with anti-barrier can activate Cascade Point. I definitely think that this is, or the theory at the time is this is a bug and it shouldn't be working. Could remain the same. We're not exactly sure, but it seems like the way that it should be working is strictly off of crits. So what is our RPM increase? We have basically numbers for all the weapons that it's appeared on so far, and that's what we're going to be sticking to. You have a 0.7 multiplier for machine guns and submachine guns, and then a 0.6 multiplier for snipers, shotguns, and auto rifles. Keep in mind that the lower modifier or lower scalar is actually better here. So to give an example of kind of how this plays out, you need to look at your RPM, you need to look at your scalar, and then you'll kind of get your modified RPM. So a 360 RPM auto rifle, for example, is going to go up to 600 RPM when Cascade Point is active. And similar to Desperado, which I believe is previously the only RPM impacting perk that we would see on weapons, it's not decreasing damage unlike that, right? So sometimes when you proc Desperado, you would have slightly less damage output or bullet per damage, I believe. And I don't think that there's any decrease in the amount of damage that you're dealing when Cascade Point is active, which is pretty huge. Taking a look at some of the weapons that it can appear on right now, we've got Lodbrok C, which is a kinetic auto, Colt Front, a kinetic SMG, the Achilles Shotgun V1.0.3, which is obviously solar. It's a shotgun. The Albruna D in a arc aggressive sniper, Wendigo, nightfall weapon that's back for this season, heavy grenade launcher, Avalanche, adaptive machine gun, the Terminus Horizon, which is a high impact machine gun, it's arc, and then Unwavering Duty, the solar adaptive machine gun as well. So really interesting perk. I am definitely going to be going for a Wendigo with some Cascade Point later on in the season, whenever that comes available. And also keep my eye out for a Terminus Horizon. You know, you never know exactly how some of those are going to land. Definitely very interesting perk. A lot of potential on the right weapons to be able to put out some serious burst damage.
Yeah, I think I'm with you with Wendigo. That may be the supreme burst damage. Combo that with a few perk combinations. And yeah, machine gun as well. Potential to, get that same kind of damage, but faster bullets down the range.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and we're talking about this again because the heavy weapon meta is getting a shakeup in Lightfall, and we don't currently know at the time of this recording what that's going to be. So we're bringing this up now so that you guys can start hoarding rolls, right? We want to be prepared for Lightfall, just so you're ready to deal the most amount of damage possible, and you're not kicking yourself that you didn't pick up that Cascade Point Avalanche, or that you still have to go back into Spire of the Watcher to go chase down that Terminus Horizon, or wait for the Adept Wendigo to show up in Grandmasters after the new Lightfall raid's already been out for a while. So again, especially on the heavy weapons, if you see a Cascade Point, just hold on to it. You might be thanking yourself a little bit later on.
Yeah, speaking of heavy weapons, Target Lock is our next perk, which may be a very interesting combination. Again, this is all cited from Rock's breakdown. So Target Lock is a stacking damage increase that also uses a hit counter system. However, they're also almost everything is derived based on the current base magazine. So for the counter system, we'll start with the conditions to increase the hit counter. So the counter will go up by 1 for every hit achieved on a target. It's not on object like barricades or Ward Dawn, so it has to be on a specific combatant or guardian target within 200 milliseconds of the previous hit. Missing this time window will instantly reset the counter back to 0. So to put that in perspective, you can't just do a quick tap fire and then stop tap fire. It has to be continuous fire, or near enough continuous fire. As the counter increases, it will quickly activate a damage buff and then increase it gradually per hit until it either hits a cap of 40% or the magazine is empty. How many hits are required to first trigger the perk to hit the cap, and how much extra damage each step of the counter provides is entirely dependent on the current base magazine. So just as a quick definition of what base magazine means, we've seen this with previous perks as well, like Focus Fury, stuff like that. It always kind of comes back to whatever your base magazine is. So the damage formula for divining the base magazine is related to that the magazine size plus increases from the magazine increasing perks and mods. So tactical, appended, extended magazine, and the mod backup mag. It does not count magazine multiplier perks such as reconstruction, ambitious assassin, or magazine refill perks like 4 times the charm or vice stinger. So it does account for whatever piece of magazine that you've got on the weapon. That does increase how this interacts with Target Lock. But for reconstruction and ambitious assassin, as we've kind of seen quite a resurgence very recently, those don't kind of interact with Target Lock. In terms of the damage formula here, again, derived based on the base magazine with a few conditions. So the Target Lock activates at 85% base magazine remaining with a 16 or 17% damage increase. So as soon as you hit that 85% remaining on the magazine, you get that 16 to 17% increase. It caps at 40% damage increase with a -5 base magazine remaining. Yes, that's -5%. We'll get into that very shortly. There is a smooth damage increase across the base magazine that results in an average damage increase of around about 25%. So we're kind of looking at explosive light kind of damage potential here. We'll use 3 examples here too, which is Lodbrok C. It does have a base magazine of 31. So the formula for this is 4 shots of 416. That's 0% damage. The 5th shot crosses that 85% mag threshold, and that activates target lock, which then deals 485. That's 16.5% damage increase. The remaining 26 shots steadily increase in damage, ending with 577. That's a 38.7% damage increase on the final shot. This equals, on average, around about a increase of 24.98%, or rounded up 25%. If you've got extended magazine on that Lodbrok C, same as before, 5 shots of 460 damage. That's your sort of base damage here. The 6th shot crosses 85% mag threshold, and that activates target lock, dealing 486. That's 16.8% damage. The remaining 31 shots steadily increase in damage, ending with 577. So that's 38.7% damage again. And again, this equals roughly an average damage increase of 24.92%. It's pretty similar here. If you're mixing in 4th times charm, however, again, base damage is 416. 6th shot crosses 85% mag threshold, and that's 486 again as the extended mag. The next 31 shots increases in damage up to 577, 38.7% damage. And then we start climbing past the base magazine. So this is where 4th times the charm maybe kind of really starts to interact with this type of perk. So climbing past the base magazine on the next 2 shots, i.e. crossing that -5% of the base magazine, hits a cap of 582, and that's where that 40% damage increases. So very interesting combination here, and that does equal a average damage increase of almost 30%. That's pretty high for a damage perk. But again, it's all based on, these are all sort of perfect scenarios. You have to make sure you're landing those shots. So for the actual visual buff indicators, kind of similar setup here with the way kind of Cascade Point works. This will be displayed on the buff and the debuff UI. Applies a visual buff stack indicator from 1 to 5, and these work on a similar breakdown. So target lock times 1 is 85% base magazine remaining, times 2 is 62.5% remaining, times 3 is 44.5% mag remaining, times 4 is 24.5% mag remaining, and target lock times 5 is that -5 base magazine remaining. Lots of science, lots of numbers being blurted out from Saint and I here. Again, Rock does go into more scientific detail, and we'll of course have that posted on the show notes. As for the weapons that will have target lock, at least for this season, you've got Lodbrok C, as we've been talking about. That's the high impact frame. You've got 7th Serve Carbine, which is the precision auto rifle. You've got Prolonged Engagement, which is the Stasis lightweight SMG, which drops from the Vanguard playlist. You've got Avalanche, if you've managed to get a target lock drop for this adaptive solar machine gun. You've got, we'll save the best to last, Terminus Horizon, which is the ARC high impact frame machine gun. And we've got Retrofit Escapade, which is the Void rapid fire machine gun. There's been a lot of talk about Retrofit Escapade. If you're pairing that with your Falcons, getting those volatile rounds, been seeing very interesting videos. I think it's maybe been blown a little bit out of proportion in terms of damage potential, but it's very interesting how this is interacting because Retrofit Escapade rolls with 4 times the charm and target lock. So very interesting. 2 very interesting perks. Again, I think we're all, obviously with Retrofit Escapade being one of the craftable weapons for this season, I think we're all heading in that direction in terms of another weapon, maybe prolonged engagement. That could be a potential choice. We haven't broke down prolonged engagement just yet, but some very interesting perks on that submachine gun. You guys got any more comments with these perks?
I'm waiting for this to show up on a trace rifle, baby. That's what I want right there.
I was gonna say, I think we know the end game of this, right? Some real potential. If the numbers are too much to remember that target lock, go burr, okay, and do a lot of damage. All right, that's the important thing to keep in mind.
A trace rifle would be very interesting. A legendary cold heart.
Oh gosh, yeah, that would be great. Yeah, so to recap, right? Cascade Point is very much a burst fire, burst damage, short damage window perk. Target lock is your sustained damage perk, right? You want to pair it with magazine perks that increase your ammo over time, like 4th times the charm, like triple tap, right? Those are the ones that we want there. So it's two damage perks for 2 different scenarios, and so that will impact, of course, the kind of weapons that we look at, right? Machine guns have very large magazine sizes. Trace rifles have very large magazine sizes. Certain auto rifles and certain SMGs also can get decent ammo sizes for being primary weapons, so that's why we're interested in them for target lock. And then, of course, Cascade Point. We want weapons that deal a lot of damage quickly so that we can take advantage of that RPM increase as well, which is why we're all interested in that Wendigo potential role there, and especially since Wendigo can get Impulse Amplifier in column 3, we could be putting out a lot of grenades very quickly. So we'll cover that, of course, in a later time. We'll talk about a few of the other weapons that we've mentioned a little bit later on in this season, but a lot of cool things to talk about, and we're saving the coolest thing to talk about for last, which is our birthday, our show's birthday. So 1 year ago today, actually, I believe, St. Kabir and I sat down to record the very first episode of Podcast versus Enemies. We were talking about the grasp of avarice weapons. I'm sure I didn't make any mistakes in talking about what the god rolls were for any of them. We had a great time. I think we did a 2-man run of the dungeon right before we sat down to record, didn't we, Saint?
It's true. That's way back at the beginning.
Yeah. Yep. This is before Witch Queen came out. We were still quite a few weeks away from Witch Queen, but we were very excited getting to know each other. We were waiting for Court to get ready. The next episode after that, we had Mr. Sutton, our audio engineer, on to talk about, oh goodness, I can't even remember what we were talking about. I remember he talked about his favorite weapon, which is Trustee. And then the third episode, of course, is when Court joined us for good, and then we were off to the races. And it's been 45 episodes. Time has flown by, hasn't it, guys?
Yeah,
absolutely.
I was just looking, and that second episode was called In-Game Basics, and
oh, right, of course, yeah.
I think maybe it's time we revisit that in our new expansion as we go into a big season. But yeah, I just went back and listened to that episode 1 the other day, and it's weird. It feels like a long time ago, honestly.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think we can we can start off here with our biggest episode yet, right? It was not too long ago. We had a serious wave in the PvE world of getting to talk to some developers.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah,
Court, go ahead.
Yeah, Vivian and Chris were on our show, and that was we'll talk about our kind of individual highlights in a second here, but I think that's our big highlight for the year, and maybe for the next couple of months and years to come, because getting not just 1 but 2 weapon devs on the show just to talk about stuff. And I think I can remember, was it maybe episode 5 or 10 or something like that, we were just like, I wonder when we'll get Bungie devs on our show, and it's like, maybe like episode 100.
Yeah.
But not 30. I wasn't expecting it'd be that soon.
I also thought it was going to be Merc like throwing us a bone of like, okay, you made it to episode 80, I'll do an interview, or something like that. And yeah,
that's right.
No, honestly, shout out to Vivian and Chris for coming on the show. And that was very humbling experience, to be honest. Very exciting. A lot of stuff behind the scenes that I think a lot of other, whether it's listeners or other podcasts that haven't had Bungie devs on their show, don't get to kind of see. It's a lot of kind of paperwork, so to speak, to get all this sorted and to get all the scheduling lined up. I know I think it was like midnight when it recorded, when we started to record, and I was like, okay, no, I'll take the hit. But yeah, that was a really fun experience.
45 episodes, man, it's just flown by. I'm sorry, I'm just processing it. 45 episodes. That's crazy.
You guys saying it's been a year, and it's been a very quick year in terms of both the podcast, but also Destiny.
Yeah.
You guys got any more comments about that?
No, we should go into the highlights. I'll just stand here in a stupor otherwise.
All right, so specifically, my big highlights. I think the realest moment has to be reading and hearing the feedback from our listeners that the three of us sound like we've been friends and we've been chatting for years about Destiny. I mean, we only, to put it in perspective, only really got properly speaking with each other a year ago.
Yeah.
And that was through text. And even then, it took a few episodes to vibe with each other. But there was a certain, I don't know, it was maybe like episode 16. I think that was around about Witch Queen, where I think there was that kind of transition of, we're all kind of gelling with each other. We're all kind of, we're vibing off each other. We're kind of going back and forth in a more kind of fluid and dynamic way on this podcast. Because I will put my hand up and say, the first couple of episodes, I was just a nervous wreck. But these guys have been great support. And of course, our listeners have been great support as well. Speaking of our listeners, reading comments related to triumph and accomplishment. So that's solo flawless dungeons, first time GM or raider. Got to try out some various builds that we've spoke about that are now their favorites. I think all that's been very, it's been made it all worthwhile doing these podcast episodes. Again, there's a lot of work behind the scenes when we're script writing or we're making up these builds, or anything related to that. But to hear that type of feedback has always been just very gratifying, and like, we're making a difference. If it's just one person or if it's a couple hundred people, it's good vibes all around. I think, speaking of the three of us, being able to confidently buildcraft, discuss and critique our respective, quote, main classes. Obviously, the three of us do play all three classes, but for me personally, hearing Saint and Impetus talk about Titan and Warlock respectively has got me a lot more interested in buildcrafting on a non-hunter class. So absolutely been loving the Stasis Osmiomancy and the Arc Fallen Sunstar Warlock builds, and the Solar Consecration and the Arc Zeus Titan builds. So shout out to these lovely, fine gentlemen for kind of reigniting the spark and playing Titan and Warlock again. I will say, I think that was kind of my chance. That was a mistake. I don't think we ever planned to be, I was the Hunter, Saint was the Titan, Impetus was the Warlock. That just kind of, the moons and stars aligned to cause that to happen. That was never the case for this type of episode, but I think we've kind of ran with it really well, especially when we've been doing build crafting breakdowns. And finally, I think we were talking about Osmosis earlier on. I think that we've taken that on board as being our little baby, because we keep hyping it up. And I think some folks are just like, why do you guys keep mentioning Osmosis? It's a trash perk. It's like, no, absolutely not. It's great.
It's getting better every season, baby.
Exactly. So that's my kind of minor kind of highlight, is that we've took Osmosis as being the podcast versus enemies recommended perk for all weapons.
There's a sick part of me that hopes that we don't get any strand weapons next season, and I can just take all my kinetic osmosis weapons, like, new strand gameplay.
My chain of command now does strand damage. Impetus, what are your highlights?
Oh, I'd probably say just the ability to pick a fight and disagree with so many folks over pretty much anything has been one of, really, it's come to be my calling card. I've really gotten to enjoy just being in the right about everything and getting other people to understand why I'm always in the right. But over 45 episodes, it really does take a toll on you. So I don't know how much longer I can keep going with it, but having the two of you around really no, I'm just kidding, guys. I think the coolest thing about being a podcast host and having a community is just understanding how small you are as a person. Bungie will of course put out cool things during the reveals, like this many people signed up to play or pre-ordered Witch Queen, or this many people did the legendary campaign, and you see those big numbers and you just think to yourself like, oh, that is a number, but I can't really visualize that, I can't process it. But getting to be in the Destiny Massive Breakdowns community and just getting all these people chiming in about all sorts of stuff, weapon recommendations, warlock builds, or tips and strategies for raids, dungeons, and GMs, you do start to understand just how small your feedback and perspective is. And at the same time, when people say, oh, I hadn't thought, that recommendation you made, it never even occurred to me, you also get that validation. But I think for me in particular, I've just really enjoyed getting to hear how other people play the game that I play and that I've, put thousands of hours into. That has really kept me coming back to Destiny 2, especially, having to play all three. Well, I don't have to play all three characters, but I do play all three characters every season. I get them up to pinnacle level. I like to do a GM on all three every season, and that that takes a lot of work. Sometimes RNG is kind to me, sometimes it's not, but it can be tiring. So having something like that where there's a piece of feedback or a recommendation or just a different view of the game that kind of keeps me interested, that's a nice thing to chase when I'm on, say, my Titan, and I'm grinding out those 3 Gambit matches on a particular week. I'm doing it because I want to play with something in the end game that somebody brought up to me, or that Saint recommended, or a member of the community recommended, and I want to see how that works. Or that does make the game more fun. And I was nervous about that actually when we started. Was am I going to grow to hate playing Destiny 2 now that I have a weekly podcast that I have to do? And I think that's probably been my highlight, is just knowing that I like the game even more, even though I have plenty of disagreements with how things work, and I wish some things were different, of course, but I'm still having fun, and that has been really great. And it's especially great that I get to have fun with a community of people that think differently, but also think similarly on so many different topics within the game and outside of the game, and that's really just been an absolute joy for me. So yeah, I look forward to keep disagreeing and being right and wrong about a number of things, and I hope that those of you listening keep me on my toes, because I'm having a blast so far, and I look forward to having a blast in the next 45 episodes. Saint, what's been your highlight?
Yeah, I would say something I've just been thinking about coming off of your last couple of points there is the Massive Breakdowns Discord was kind of like the hidden gem in my past year of like really getting invested into the community. I would kind of browse Destiny Science for a long time, because it was like one of these few places that I knew I could find like very thorough information on like what was going on with a damage perk or something like that. And then eventually got into the Patrons Lounge and was like, engaged-ish, but not really. And then, over the past year of the show, I've just getting to know a lot of the people that support the show, just getting to know a lot of people in the server, and just all their knowledge and stuff like that is just, it's immense, and I enjoy going to our like builds craft post section and just looking at everything everybody else is putting up in there, right? In combos that like you're saying you wouldn't think of, or like things that you just wouldn't try out. Even like weapon reviews. I know Jedi has been posting a bunch of like weapon reviews in there for like just not popular weapons and things like that. And I love that kind of a stuff. I also say that looking back in the beginning, looking back in the beginning of the show, I think that I put a lot of pressure on myself of like, oh, if I'm going to be on this PvE show, then I need to be the most knowledgeable, like most accomplished player that I can possibly be. And I have to be going through like every challenge that's available, or I'm not going to be like credible, right? Or that I'm not going to keep my spot on the show, or like whatever the case was. And I think that did make me not enjoy playing the game as much for a stint of, like you're talking about, am I gonna like detest Destiny now because I'm like working on it all the time? And luckily that was only like a couple of a month period, but I remember like just feeling a lot of pressure on myself for like, oh, we have to beat Val on day one, or I'm like a failure as like the raid guy, right? And I mean, that is just like so not true. And like statistically speaking, it's very likely that you're going to fail, even if you have cleared like a day one raid before. And that was just like just a couple, times I can think of like putting a lot of pressure on myself for like needing to be the utmost expert. And that's just not true, and like nobody that plays the game knows the absolute maximum amount of detail other than the people that literally made it. And even they don't know every single thing about every aspect of the game. Right. So, having you guys, just so knowledgeable and also so engaged in other parts of the game makes me, it kind of frees me up to feel like I don't have to be so knowledgeable about every part of the game, right? Like I can invest in like the things that I want to invest in the game and be really knowledgeable about that and be very enthusiastic about that, but like not forcing myself to try to engage in every single piece of content is also just like very freeing. And kind of like on the same note as the Patrons Lounge, just like the amount of support that we get for the show, the amount of listenership that we have is like crazy and disproportionate for like how long we've been around. If you were gonna if you just like picked a video game podcast that had been around for like a year, the odds that we would be successful as we are is like astronomically low. So the platform that we got from like Merc and Kit and Massive Breakdowns as a whole is like totally not lost on us, right? And the community that we got to like come into is a huge opportunity. And then like also having, kind of like being just set up to work with you guys, right? And not having to like worry about my hosts or anything like that, of like, it's so easy to record with you guys and it just keeps getting easier like every episode, right? And I mean, that is just like a huge thing, going back to the idea of, again, not having to be like an expert about everything. And I mean, last thing I'll say is getting the chance to work on contract at Bungie for a few months was just super eye-opening. It taught me a lot, obviously grew my appreciation about just like the game and game dev in general, but also like meeting all these people that you look up to and just having a conversation with them and seeing them have that same enthusiasm as like, Chris and Vivian did when they like came on to talk about the interview. That's not just like a front that they're putting on because they're here to do some like PR stuff. People are just like that, and they just genuinely have like this enthusiasm for the thing that they're working on, and are incredibly willing to talk about what they're doing, how they got there, how they got into game development in general and a bunch of stuff like that. Specifically like Brendan Thorne was my boss when I was working there, who's great. Another guy I had followed through his Raid and Dungeons time, Tomo and Chris Proctor and David Hostler and Hops and Holtzman, and even Merc, right? Kind of just getting to watch him like working in his environment was, it's a treat, and yeah, I'm just grateful for the chance to do that. And also it like really shifted my mindset in my like personal life, in my professional life, to try to pursue working in game development over what I had been doing in my previous job, which honestly just was not bad, but something I think that started to wear on me over time, that I was just not that passionate about, that I just didn't care about it, and to have that opportunity to kind of open my mind to a different career and stuff like that was huge. Finally, yeah, just hearing from people that listen to the show, that tune in, that learn about builds and that take on any challenges and can spread knowledge to their friends and their clans, and their fire teams is it's why we do it.
That's why we do it.
All right. Court, you want to start us off with some little community bits here?
Yeah, so we did reach out to our listeners over on the Massive Breakdowns Discord server, and Saint also put out a tweet where just kind of soliciting some kind of feedback specifically to do with, accomplishments or triumphs or highlights that they've got from either this podcast or the Massive Breakdowns community at large. So we had a message from Terpin who said, "You'll have inspired me to attempt going for solo dungeons, which I wasn't sure I could do. That being said, not only was I able to solo Shattered Throne and Prophecy, I was also able to get my first solo flawless on Pit." So GG's. Thumbs up from the three of us here for that triumph.
Imagine being able to do solo flawless dungeons, man. I'll get there one day, right, guys?
Solo flawless GMs, but nah, not Shattered Throne. All right.
That's just way too hard, dude. That's way too much work. All right, our next one is from Deck. My favorite moment from this past year was getting to play with the PvE team and former host Kit and the amazing patrons of Massive Breakdowns and all sorts of content the game has to offer. I can't thank you all enough for the endless hours of entertainment. Thank you so much, Deck. It's been a blast to play with you and hear from you in Discord. You are a funny dude.
Nobody can make a high quality meme quicker. Okay. Nobody.
I can't tell you the number of times I've been roasted by this guy. Goodness sakes.
Next one was from a Broderick17, aka Alex Broderick. I love hearing the perspectives from all three classes on all the build ideas, and it's even given me a few new ones to try out as we've been through the last few seasons. Love to hear it.
Yeah, absolutely. As I said, hearing builds from you guys has reignited that spark to play on Warlock and Titan. We have a comment from Rock DC, the very same one that's been basically the fourth host of this episode. Impetus pointing to the stands and proclaiming that he won't have to care about Brigand's Law in a few weeks, and being correct is one of his highlights. Alternatively, it's the sheesh being Rock's favourite PvE content from, I think very much the two of us. I haven't heard a saint sheesh.
It's very rare. I mean, it happens, you know.
In the VCs, you can catch
me. In the
me.
VCs,
right?
That's right. Yeah. We're going to have a lot to sheesh about in the new year, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Goodness.
Mm-hmm.
All right, then we've got Phaeton. 7 hours with the Massive Breakdowns community playing Destiny. Great vibes all around. Yes, that was... The Iron Banner sessions go hard when the PvE players have to play PvP. Goodness sakes!
And usually at the top of the scoreboard.
Well,
may I add? Hey, you were popping off with Crimson. I'm telling you,
dude. Those PvP guns are pretty good.
And what was the sidearm you were using as well?
Okay. Okay. Yes.
No,
yes.
Dude, you were.
I got an Ally Demand with Rangefinder Iron Reach. I'll be honest, the kick is pretty brutal because the silencer just completely covers up the scope on it. But it's good. Listen, I'm a fan of them in PvP. Right, they're quite strong there. Has never been a doubt for me. It's the PvE applications. I'd rather just use an SMG when it rolls around with the perks that I want. And I've been vindicated so far, and I will stand firm in my convictions. Thank you very much.
Next up was one from Hio. You three have been some of the most fun to interact with in the Massive Breakdowns community because of how you're each willing to give your opinions and thoughts regardless of what someone else would think of them, and how much fun I've had with y'all. Much appreciated, Hio. We love to talk about Destiny. Honestly, I think we're all grateful that we get to do it on a podcast because we would probably talk about it an equal amount just in our normal lives. So this it really is a great opportunity, and we're thankful to be on the show together and to be in a big and just I don't want to say, I guess, cohesive communities is what I'm going to say. People that play together, people that encourage each other, people that prop each other up for their accomplishments, and that's about as much as you could ask for from a Discord server or a group of people like that.
Yep. Finally, and certainly not least, I will say if you've got any more comments or kind of triumphs, anything you want to share, do reach out to us, DM us if you didn't get a chance to do so. We'll kind of might not read them next episode because we do have more content to break down before Lightfall, but we'll definitely read them and appreciate them. But yes, this last one from T-Dot. My favourite memory was when our great audio engineer had the stroke of genius to slowly insert himself into the podcast in the edit. Love to hear it. Yes. Sudden, or alternatively, or I should say, formerly known as Sudden, now known as Autodidaktos, has definitely been having a little bit of fun in the edit room.
At my expense, I would just like to clarify here. Little punk.
All right. Well, that's it for another episode, unless you guys have got any more comments. to say.
This is going to be a tough year to top. You know, year two's got some serious competition.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna have to really put up some big ones here.
All right, well, that's it for episode 45. Thank you once again for your messages, feedback, and highlights for 2022. We cannot wait to do it all over again for Lightfall and beyond. We'll be back next week with our Spire of the Watcher dungeon and weapons breakdowns. We also want to thank our audio engineer, Autodidaktos, formerly known as Mr. Sudden. Thank you for a year of 2 to 3 hour episodes. My name is Court. You can find me over on Twitter as @CourtProjects. You can find me in the Discord as Court, and you can find my documentation and soon to be infographics over on the Massive Breakdowns website. Impetus.
My name is Impetus. You can find me by that name on Discord and in Destiny, and as Impetus always on Twitter. It's been a joy to serve you as a host, and I can't wait to do it next year. Saint, where can we find you?
Yep, my name is Saint Kabir. You can find me by Saint_Kabir on Twitter and YouTube, Discord. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time in episode 46 of Podcast vs. Enemies.